A freezing winter morning. A struggling waitress, Lisa, hurries to work until she sees him. A young boy, alone in the snow, silent, fragile, trapped in a wheelchair. She doesn't hesitate. She saves him. But then, everything changes. A mysterious man watches from the shadows. A powerful billionaire reveals himself. The boy isn't just lost. He's the key to a life Lisa never expected. Now, she's caught between protecting the child she's grown to love and stepping into a world of wealth, danger, and an impossible proposal. Ring a test. A choice. A love she never saw coming. But in a game of power and trust, who is really saving who? Her life will never be the same. Lisa hurried to work, tucking her hands deeper into the pockets of her thin coat. The snow crunched under her boots, and the icy wind snuck past her scarf, biting at her skin. Just another ordinary morning, another routine walk to the not-so-fancy restaurant where she worked as a waitress. But today, something felt different. At the corner of the street, near an abandoned newspaper stand, she noticed a small figure. At first, she thought it was just another homeless person seeking shelter from the cold, but as she got closer, her heart clenched. It was a boy. He looked no older than 8, sitting in a wheelchair covered with a worn-out blanket. His face was pale, his lips slightly blue, and frozen tears clung to his cheeks. He wasn't begging, wasn't calling for help. He simply sat there, staring into nothing, rocking slightly back and forth. Lisa slowed her steps. "Are you alone?" Her voice trembled, but not from the cold. No response. The boy barely reacted, only curling in on himself as if trying to disappear. Lisa glanced around. The street was mostly empty, a few cars passing by in the distance. No one else seemed to notice or care. She knew she was already running late. She knew that stopping could get her into trouble with her boss. But she also knew one thing for sure, there was no way she could just walk away. Taking a deep breath, she stepped forward. Lisa's fingers trembled against the cold metal handles of the wheelchair. The boy didn't react when she touched it, didn't resist, didn't show any signs of fear or relief. He was just still. She glanced around the nearly deserted street, hoping, praying, that someone would step forward and say, "Oh, there you are. We've been looking for you." But no one came. The snow kept falling, the wind kept howling, and the boy just sat there, rocking slightly, his breath coming in short, quiet puffs of white mist. Lisa had to do something. She wasn't an impulsive person. She needed a plan. Could she take him straight to the police? Maybe. But what if he was running from something? What if the people looking for him were the ones who abandoned him in the first place? The thought made her stomach twist. The only thing she knew for sure was that she couldn't leave him out here. But what about work? Frank was already in a bad mood most mornings. If she walked in late and with a kid in a wheelchair, he'd lose it. And what if her gut was wrong? What if this was just a case of a lost child? Lisa looked down at the boy again. His thin hands twitched against the blanket, his movements repetitive, rhythmic. Something about it hurt to watch. This wasn't just a lost child. This was a child who had been left behind. Screw work. Lisa tightened her grip on the handles of the wheelchair and started pushing. The wheels hated the snow. Every few steps, she had to push harder, gritting her teeth as the weight of the chair dragged through the slush. "Okay, buddy, we're gonna get you warmed up," she muttered under her breath, though he gave no sign of hearing her. A few people passed them on the sidewalk, businessmen in long coats, a woman walking her dog, but no one stopped to help. Lisa wanted to scream. Was this really the world they lived in? Where a child could sit in the freezing cold and people would just walk past. Her arms were burning by the time she reached Bruno's Diner. It wasn't much, just a small, slightly worn-down restaurant with a blinking neon open sign in the window. But to Lisa, it was familiar. Safe. She pushed the door open, nearly stumbling inside as warmth rushed over her. The scent of coffee, butter, and burnt toast filled the air. And then, "Lisa, what the hell?" Frank stood behind the counter, arms crossed, scowling. He was in his 50s, balding, and had the permanent attitude of a man who had been over this 1,000 times before. Lisa forced a smile, still catching her breath. "Good morning to you too, Frank." Frank's eyes narrowed as he looked past her at the wheelchair. "Who's the kid?" Lisa opened her mouth, then stopped. She didn't know his name. "I found him," she admitted. "Outside. In the snow. He needs help." Frank let out a sharp laugh. "Oh, and you just brought him in here? What, is this a shelter now?" Lisa's fists clenched. "I couldn't leave him there." Frank rubbed his face in frustration. "Lisa, we're running a business, not a rescue mission. I can't have." A quiet sound stopped him. It wasn't a word. Not really. Just a small, almost whimpering noise. Lisa's breath hitched. She turned, and her heart broke. The boy had pulled his blanket tighter around himself. His fingers clutched the fabric so hard that his knuckles turned white. His whole body was tense, overwhelmed. Lisa didn't know much about autism, but she knew one thing: too much noise, too many changes, too many people staring, it could be too much. Her protective instincts kicked in. She crouched beside the wheelchair, lowering her voice to something soft, calm. Hey, it's okay. You're safe." The boy didn't look at her, but his breathing slowed just a little. Lisa turned back to Frank, eyes burning. "Give me 10 minutes. Just let me get him warm. If you want to fire me after that, fine." Frank let out a long, suffering sigh. "Fine. 10 minutes. Lisa didn't waste a second. She wheeled the boy to the corner booth, the one farthest from the noise, the one where the light was softest. Then she ran to the kitchen. She didn't have time to think about work, about money, about the consequences. All that mattered was helping him. She grabbed the warmest thing she could find, a bowl of potato soup, thick and steaming. When she placed it in front of him, he didn't react at first. But then, slowly, his fingers twitched toward the spoon. Lisa held her breath. He picked it up. His movements were shaky, uncertain. But when he finally took a small sip of the soup, something in his face softened. Lisa smiled. It was the first step. And for now, that was enough. She didn't realize how much time had passed until she felt someone looming over the table. "Frank." He sighed, rubbing the back of his head. "Look, Lisa. I don't like this. But—" He glanced at the boy, who was still eating, small and silent and so alone. Another sigh. "Fine. He can stay for now. But if the cops come looking for him—" "They won't," Lisa said quickly. She wasn't sure why she believed that. But something told her that whoever had left this boy behind wasn't coming back for him. Frank grumbled but waved a hand. "Just don't let customers see him. This place already looks bad enough without me running a damn orphanage." Lisa grinned. She turned back to the boy, feeling a warmth in her chest that had nothing to do with the diner's heater. "Looks like you're stuck with me for a little while, kid," she said softly. The boy didn't respond. But for the first time, Lisa swore she saw the smallest flicker of relief in his dark eyes. She wasn't sure what was going to happen next. But she knew one thing. She wasn't letting him go. Lisa sat across from the boy, watching as he quietly ate his soup. The diner buzzed faintly around them, muted conversations, the clatter of dishes, the occasional bark of Frank yelling at the kitchen staff. But in this small corner booth, it was just the two of them. He had barely moved since she brought him in. No words, no eye contact, just slow, calculated spoonfuls of soup. Lisa exhaled softly. She wasn't expecting a thank you, she just wanted something. A sign that he was okay. That he understood she wasn't here to hurt him. But he was like a locked door. And she didn't have the key. Lisa tapped her fingers against the table, hesitating before speaking. "So, do you have a name?" No answer. She tried again, gentler this time. I mean, I know you have one. But do you feel like telling me? Nothing. The only movement was the subtle, rhythmic twitch of his fingers against the spoon. He still wasn't looking at her. Lisa bit her lip. She had never been good with kids. And this wasn't just any kid, he was quiet, distant, wrapped in layers of silence that she didn't know how to unravel. But she had to try. You know, she said, leaning forward slightly, I could just give you a name. Call you something like, I don't know, Soup Kid or Snowball. Still nothing. She sighed. All right. No naming you without permission. I get it. But she saw it, the smallest twitch at the corner of his lips. It wasn't a smile. Not really. But it was something. And in this moment, something felt like a victory. Lisa leaned back in her seat, trying to shake the tension from her shoulders. That's when she saw him. The man in the black coat. Standing outside. Watching. Her stomach dropped. She froze, gripping the table, her eyes locking onto his. He was too far away for her to make out his features completely, but something about him sent a shiver down her spine. He wasn't just casually standing there. He wasn't lost. He was watching. Watching her. Watching the boy. Lisa's pulse quickened. Who the hell was he? A cold wave of panic crept up her spine. Her first instinct? Hide the boy. She didn't know why. Maybe it was paranoia, maybe it was just gut instinct. But something about that man screamed danger. She shifted in her seat, casually adjusting the boy's blanket, as if that would somehow shield him from whoever was outside. Then, the man moved. Not toward the diner. Not away. Just a single, measured step to the side. Lisa swallowed hard. Was he waiting for something? For someone? Her mind raced. Should she go out there and confront him? Call the police? No. She wasn't leaving the boy alone. Not when she didn't know what was going on. Not when she had a sinking feeling that this was just the beginning. Lisa forced herself to take a deep breath. Panicking wouldn't help. She needed to focus on the boy. She turned back to him, trying to keep her voice steady. Hey, buddy, do you know that man outside? For the first time since they sat down, he stopped moving. His spoon hovered in midair. His fingers froze. Lisa's heart skipped a beat. That was an answer. Maybe not the one she wanted, but it was something. The boy knew something about that man. And that terrified her. Lisa lowered her voice, leaning in just slightly. Listen, if you don't want to talk, that's okay. But if you need help, if you don't want to go with him, you can just nod. Or shake your head. Anything. The boy didn't nod. But he didn't shake his head either. Instead, he reached down, almost hesitantly, and grabbed her sleeve. Lisa's breath hitched. It was barely a touch. Just a small, delicate grip on the fabric of her sweater. But it spoke louder than words. Don't let me go. Lisa's stomach twisted. She glanced back at the window. The man was gone. Lisa's chest tightened. She didn't know who that man was. She didn't know where the boy had come from or what had happened before she found him in the snow. But she knew one thing for certain. She wasn't letting him go. Not now. Not ever. She gently placed her hand over his, offering warmth, comfort. You're safe here, okay? She whispered. The boy still didn't speak. But for the first time, he looked at her. Right into her eyes. And Lisa knew, whatever storm was coming next, whatever secrets were about to unfold, they were in this together. Lisa couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Even though the man in the black coat had disappeared, his presence lingered. The air in the diner felt heavier, like something unseen had crept in and settled in the corners of the room. She needed answers. And she had a terrible feeling that finding them would change everything. Lisa's fingers gripped the edge of the table as she fought to stay calm. She stole another glance at the window. The sidewalk was empty now, but the image of the man standing there, watching, was burned into her mind. Who was he? And more importantly, what did he want? She turned back to the boy. He had returned to his quiet state, his small hands resting on the table, his fingers twitching slightly. But she wasn't fooled. She had seen it. The way he had frozen when she asked about the man. The way he had grabbed her sleeve, his tiny fingers clenching the fabric like a silent plea. Lisa's stomach twisted. That man wasn't a stranger to him. Which meant, this wasn't random. She had just walked into something far, far bigger than she realized. All right, Lisa. Spill. She flinched at Frank's voice. The grumpy diner owner stood behind the counter, arms crossed, a deep frown on his face. Lisa sighed. Of course he was watching. She glanced around, 2 regulars at the far end of the diner, a man with a newspaper, and an older woman sipping coffee. No one else seemed to care. But Frank cared. And that meant trouble. What's the deal with the kid? He asked, nodding toward the boy. Lisa hesitated. What was she supposed to say? The truth? That she found a half-frozen child alone in the snow and brought him here? That a mystery man had been watching them? That she had no idea what the hell was going on? Yeah. That would go over well. Just helping him out, she said instead, keeping her voice casual. He was out there alone. I couldn't just leave him. Frank snorted. So what, you adopting him now? Lisa clenched her jaw. I don't know yet. Frank narrowed his eyes. Yeah, well, I don't like weird stuff happening in my diner, Lisa. And this? This is weird. Lisa forced a smile. Weird keeps life interesting. Frank didn't look amused. Keep him out of trouble. And keep me out of trouble. Then he stomped off toward the kitchen. Lisa let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. She looked at the boy. He still wasn't talking. But he was watching her now. And for the first time, she saw a question in his eyes. The bell above the diner door jingled. Lisa tensed. For a split second, she thought the man in the black coat had come inside. But instead, 2 strangers walked in, a man and a woman, dressed in dark, professional-looking clothes. Something about them felt off. They weren't here for food. Lisa's gut told her they were here for the boy. The woman, tall and sharp-eyed, scanned the room. Her gaze landed on Lisa's booth and stayed there. Lisa's pulse spiked. She immediately leaned forward, lowering her voice. Listen, buddy. I need you to stay really quiet, okay? The boy didn't respond, but she saw his fingers tighten slightly against the table. He understood. The man and woman walked straight toward them. Lisa forced herself to stay calm. Excuse me, the woman said smoothly, flashing a polite smile. We're looking for someone. Lisa played dumb. Oh yeah? Missing a wallet or something? The woman chuckled, but her eyes were cold. Not quite. She pulled out her phone, tapped the screen, and turned it around. A photo of the boy stared back at Lisa. We need to take him with us, the woman said. Lisa's hands curled into fists. She had a choice. She could pretend she didn't know the boy and let them take him. Or she could fight. And Lisa Carter had never been the type to back down. Lisa put on her best unimpressed face. Never seen him before, she said, leaning back. What's this about? The woman's smile didn't waver, but Lisa could tell she wasn't buying it. He's very important to someone. We need to bring him home. Lisa's heart pounded. Home. That word sounded wrong. If they really cared, why had he been alone in the snow? She gave them a slow, skeptical look. And you two are? A private security firm, the woman said smoothly. We work for his family. Lisa faked a yawn. Huh. That's funny. Because he grabbed my sleeve when I asked about you guys. For the first time, the woman's smile faltered. Lisa leaned in. So tell me. If he's so important, why was he out there in the cold, alone? No jacket, no gloves. Just waiting to freeze to death? The woman's jaw tightened. The man beside her, who had been silent the whole time, suddenly reached for the boy's arm. Lisa's instincts kicked in. Big mistake. She grabbed the man's wrist before he could touch the boy. Her grip was steel. I wouldn't do that if I were you, buddy. The entire diner went silent. Even Frank poked his head out of the kitchen. The man stared at Lisa, clearly not expecting resistance. The woman sighed. We don't want trouble. Lisa didn't let go. Then leave. A tense moment passed. Then, the woman nodded to her partner. They stepped back. But before they left, she leaned in close and whispered, You're making a mistake. Lisa smiled sweetly. So sue me. Then they were gone. But the damage was done. Lisa knew this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The second they were out the door, Lisa turned to the boy. Okay, buddy, she breathed. What the hell is going on? Still no words. But then, he reached for her sleeve again. And this time, he didn't let go. Lisa exhaled, her decision made. She didn't know what she had just gotten herself into. But one thing was clear. She wasn't just protecting him anymore. She was keeping him. And no one, not mystery men, not security firms, not even billionaires, was taking him away. Not now. Not ever. Lisa's world had just shrunk to this moment. The boy sat across from her, his fingers still gripping her sleeve, a silent plea written in his touch. He didn't talk, but he didn't need to. His actions said enough. He didn't want to go with those people. And Lisa had just made a very dangerous decision. She had chosen him. Now, she had to figure out what that meant. Lisa sat frozen, her mind racing. She had no idea who she was up against, but it didn't matter. She had drawn a line in the sand. That woman had called it a mistake. Lisa called it doing the right thing. But now, the stakes were real. If those people came back, and Lisa was sure they would, what was she supposed to do? She wasn't a cop. She wasn't a lawyer. She was a waitress. And yet, she had just picked a fight with people who looked like they had the power to make someone disappear. Her pulse pounded in her ears. What the hell did I just get myself into? Lisa needed answers. She glanced at the boy again. He was still watching her, silent as ever, his small fingers curled tightly against her sleeve. She forced herself to stay calm. Okay, buddy. Let's start small. Do you know who those people were? No answer. She swallowed. Are they the ones who left you out there? Still, nothing. But then, his hands twitched. Not much. Just a flicker of movement. But Lisa saw it. A reaction. She exhaled slowly. Okay. So, they weren't your friends. He didn't nod. But he didn't deny it either. Lisa tapped her fingers against the table. She needed another approach. What about the man outside? The one in the black coat. Do you know him? The boy froze. Lisa's chest tightened. That was an answer. A chill crawled up her spine. Whoever that man was, he wasn't just watching. He was waiting. For what? For her to make a move? Or for someone else to? Lisa's stomach twisted. She had a terrible feeling that the real game had just begun. Lisa needed to think. Fast. Her options weren't great. She could call the cops. Except, what would she say? Hi, I found a kid in the snow, and now creepy people want him back, but I don't trust them. Yeah. That would go over real well. She could run. Take the boy somewhere safe, somewhere those people couldn't find him. But where? She had no family nearby, no backup. She was completely alone in this. She could wait. Stay here. Act normal. Hope those people didn't come back with something worse than fake smiles. None of those options felt good. And that's when the diner door opened. Lisa's breath caught. She expected the agents to return. She expected the man in the black coat. But instead, a different man walked in. Tall. Well-dressed. Confident. And rich. Lisa knew money when she saw it. The tailored coat, the polished shoes, the subtle watch that probably cost more than her rent. This man was in a different world than hers. And yet, he walked straight toward her table. Lisa's throat went dry. The boy stiffened, his fingers tightening around the fabric of her sweater. The man stopped at the booth, looking down at them with sharp, piercing eyes. Lisa forced herself to stay calm. "Can I help you?" The man smiled. It wasn't friendly. It wasn't unkind. It was the kind of smile people gave when they already knew the answer to their question. "You already have," he said smoothly. Lisa's stomach dropped. This was him. The man in the black coat. Up close, he looked even more dangerous. Not in a violent way, but in a way that told Lisa he was the kind of man who never lost a game. And right now? She had just stepped onto his chessboard. Lisa's instincts screamed at her to play it cool. "Not sure what you mean," she said, forcing a casual tone. The man slid into the seat across from her like he belonged there. Like he owned the place. Lisa's hands curled into fists under the table. The boy stayed perfectly still. "I was watching," the man said simply. Lisa's breath hitched. There it was. No lies. No pretending. Just the cold, hard truth. She forced herself to meet his gaze. "That's not creepy at all." The man smirked. "I needed to see what kind of person you were." Lisa's pulse pounded. "And?" His smirk deepened. "You didn't disappoint." A chill ran through her. "Who are you?" she asked. The man leaned forward, his blue eyes glinting. "My name is Alexander Carter. And that," he nodded toward the boy, "is my son." Lisa's world tilted. Her breath caught in her throat. His son? Her eyes flicked to the boy, then back to the man. And suddenly, it all made sense. The wealth. The security. The strange, calculated way he had been watching. Alexander Carter wasn't just rich. He was powerful. And this wasn't some lost child. This was a test. Lisa had just been tested. And she had no idea if she had won or lost. Lisa barely found her voice. "If he's your son, why was he alone in the snow?" Alexander's smirk faded. His jaw tightened. "Because I needed to see what kind of people are left in this world," he said quietly. "And now I have my answer." Lisa shook her head, rage bubbling up. "So you used him? As a social experiment?" Alexander didn't flinch. "I protected him. My team was watching him the entire time." Lisa wanted to scream. She had been played. But then, his expression shifted. For the first time, there was something real in his eyes. A plea. "I need someone like you," he said. Lisa frowned. "For what?" Alexander exhaled slowly. "To stay in his life. To help him. To be something real for him." Lisa's heart pounded. "Are you saying?" Alexander held her gaze. "I'm offering you a life, Lisa. A home. A future. Not as a nanny. Not as an employee." He leaned forward, his next words sending shockwaves through her. "I want you to marry me." Lisa's mind shattered. This wasn't just about the boy. This was about all of them. And suddenly, her world was no longer her own. Lisa couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Even though the man in the black coat had disappeared, the weight of his stare lingered. She glanced at the boy again. He was still sitting quietly, his small fingers gripping the edges of his blanket. He hadn't spoken a word, hadn't asked for help, hadn't even reacted much. But Lisa knew he wasn't just any lost child. And whoever that man was, he wasn't just a random stranger. She needed answers. Taking a deep breath, Lisa pulled out her phone. Should she call the police? Or maybe the local shelter? Someone had to be looking for this kid. Before she could decide, the diner doors swung open. The chime above the entrance rang loud in the quiet room, and Lisa's heart stopped. It was him. The man from outside. He stepped inside with the kind of presence that made the entire diner go silent. Even Frank, who was always barking orders at the cooks, shut his mouth. He wasn't just some guy. He radiated power. His black wool coat was dusted with snow, his polished shoes making no sound against the tiled floor. A man in his late 30s, sharp features, piercing blue eyes, eyes that locked onto Lisa and the boy immediately. Lisa swallowed hard. He wasn't angry. He wasn't frantic like a worried father looking for his son. No, he was calm. Controlled. Like he had planned this. He walked straight to their booth and stopped. For the first time since Lisa had found him, the boy reacted. His fingers twitched, his head tilted slightly, not quite fear, not quite recognition. Something else. Lisa's voice felt stuck in her throat, but she forced herself to speak. Do you know him? She asked the boy softly. Silence. Then, the man spoke. Yes, he said, his voice deep and smooth. He's my son. Lisa's breath caught. Son? His son? Her eyes flickered between them, looking for resemblance. And now that she really looked, it was there. The same sharp nose, the same dark hair. But if this man was the boy's father, why was his son alone on the freezing streets in a wheelchair? Lisa's protective instincts flared. Then why was he out there? She demanded, her voice firm. Alone. Freezing. Where were you? The man's expression didn't change. If anything, he looked almost amused by her defiance. I was watching, he said simply. Lisa blinked. What? He slid into the booth across from her, his sharp eyes locked onto hers. I wanted to see what kind of person you were, he said. And now I know. Lisa's stomach dropped. This was a test. And she had just stepped into something far bigger than she ever imagined. Lisa felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. She stared at the man, trying to make sense of what he had just said. You were watching, she repeated, her voice laced with disbelief. The man nodded, completely unfazed by her shock. Yes. I needed to see how you would react. Lisa's jaw clenched. You left your son alone. In the freezing cold. In a wheelchair. Just to see if a stranger would help him? A flicker of something passed through his eyes, guilt, maybe, but it disappeared just as fast. He was never in danger, the man replied calmly. I was close the entire time. My security team was monitoring the situation. Lisa let out a short, humorless laugh. Unbelievable. You're rich, aren't you? The man smirked slightly, tilting his head. I suppose you could say that. Lisa exhaled sharply, shaking her head. She looked at the boy, still silent, still watching everything unfold with those unreadable eyes. She softened her tone. So, if he's your son, why is he like this? Why doesn't he talk? The man's gaze flickered to the boy, and for the first time, his confidence wavered just a little. His name is Daniel, he said quietly. And he has autism. He doesn't communicate the way most children do. Lisa swallowed. She had guessed as much, but hearing it confirmed made her chest ache. Had Daniel been ignored his whole life? Treated like a burden? She turned back to the man, anger bubbling up again. And what? You thought abandoning him for a few hours would prove something? The man's expression darkened. You misunderstand, miss. Lisa, she snapped. Just Lisa. Lisa, he repeated, his voice smoother now. I didn't leave him to suffer. I left him to see if someone would show him kindness. If someone, you, would help him, even when there was nothing in it for you. Lisa's stomach twisted. And why does that matter to you? He leaned forward slightly, his blue eyes piercing into hers. Because I've spent years watching people come near me only for my money. But you? You didn't hesitate. You didn't ask for anything. You just acted. That's rare. Lisa narrowed her eyes, skeptical. What are you getting at? A small, almost amused smile played on his lips. I'm offering you something, Lisa. A job. Lisa blinked. Excuse me? He clasped his hands together. I need someone who genuinely cares about Daniel. Someone patient. Someone who won't treat him like a project or a problem. Lisa's throat went dry. You want me to, what? Be his babysitter? His smile widened just a little. No. I want you to be his mother. Silence. Lisa's brain short-circuited. What? She choked out. The man straightened. Marry me. Be part of his life. Help me raise him the way he deserves. Lisa stared. This was insane. Completely insane. She was just a waitress. A nobody. And now a millionaire was sitting across from her, offering her a life she never even dreamed of. She should have laughed in his face. She should have walked away. But then she looked at Daniel again. The way he sat there, so small, so quiet. The way he had reacted to her warmth when no one else seemed to notice him. And in that moment, she realized she couldn't walk away from him. Not now. Not ever. Lisa's entire world felt like it had just flipped upside down. She sat frozen in the diner booth, staring at the man who had just asked her to marry him, a complete stranger, a millionaire, and apparently the father of the boy she had just saved. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. This is a joke, right? The man's expression remained unreadable. No joke. Lisa let out a sharp breath and leaned back against the seat, shaking her head. You can't just buy a mother for your kid. That's not how this works. It's not about money, he said simply. It's about trust. And today, you proved to me that you're the kind of person Daniel needs. Lisa's heart clenched. Daniel. She looked at the boy again. He was still staring blankly, his small fingers tapping against the table in a rhythmic pattern. He looked safe. Warm. Comfortable. But was that because of her? She swallowed hard. I don't even know your name. The man smiled slightly, as if amused that she hadn't asked earlier. Alexander Carter. Lisa frowned. The name sounded familiar. And then it clicked, Alexander Carter. The Alexander Carter. Billionaire. CO. The kind of man whose name was printed in fancy magazines, the kind of man who never, ever stepped foot in places like Bruno's Diner. And yet, here he was. Offering her a life she could never have imagined. She exhaled slowly. Look, Alexander, this is crazy. You don't even know me. I know enough, he said, his voice steady. I know that when you saw Daniel out there alone, you didn't hesitate. You didn't ask for anything. You didn't call the police to get rid of him. You helped him. Lisa bit her lip. And what if I say no? Alexander's expression didn't change. Then I'll leave. And I'll keep searching for someone who cares as much as you do. Her chest tightened. She wanted to tell him no. She wanted to tell him that this wasn't how life worked, that you didn't just meet someone and marry them overnight. But when she looked at Daniel, really looked at him, she saw something else. A little boy who had been alone for too long. A little boy who deserved more. Lisa wasn't sure if she could love Alexander Carter. But she was already starting to love his son. She took a deep breath. I have conditions. Alexander's eyebrows lifted slightly. Go on. Lisa held up a finger. First, this isn't just a business deal. If I do this, I do it because of Daniel. Not for money. Not for you. A smirk tugged at the corner of Alexander's lips. Understood. Second, I'm not quitting my job just because you're rich. I've worked my whole life, and I don't want to sit around doing nothing. He nodded. I can respect that. Third, Lisa hesitated, then looked directly into his eyes. I don't trust you yet. For the first time, something in Alexander's expression shifted. Just slightly. Fair enough. Lisa exhaled. Then. I guess we'll see where this goes. She wasn't saying yes. But she wasn't saying no either. And for now, that was enough. Daniel made a small noise, his first sound all morning. When Lisa turned to him, she saw something new in his eyes. A flicker of recognition. A flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, this was the start of something real. Something worth fighting for. And for the first time in a long time, Lisa felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be.